Tax day upon us once again. What new policies does the Obama administration have in store for us? I'm Allen Barton. Stand by for the front page.
There are others who are saying, well, this is just a gimmick. It's taxing millionaires and billionaires, just imposing the Buffett rule won't do enough to close the deficit. Well, I agree. That's not all we have to do to close the deficit. But the notion that it doesn't solve the entire problem doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it at all.
Yeah, after all, it solves less than 1% of the problem. So let's talk about it again and again and give big speeches and demagogue about it when it solves less than 1% of the problem. I like that. Yeah, I agree. It doesn't really solve the problem, but doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it. Joining me in studio, Don Watkins, fellow at the Ayn Rand Center for Individual Rights, and Terry Jones, associate editor for Investors Business Daily. Terry, calm me down. What are they doing? What is he doing?
Just relax. Everything will be okay.
They're from the government. They're here to help us.
Yeah, what they're doing is this is class warfare. It has nothing to do whatsoever with the government's fiscal picture. It has nothing to do with the long-term budget. It has nothing to do with reducing deficits. Nothing. This tax, this 30% Buffett rule tax that they want to impose on millionaires, which everybody says, oh yeah, let's go after the millionaires. That's a great idea. Mm-hmm. Well, two things. One is it raises virtually nothing in the context of our larger budget.
I think we borrow in 10 minutes what this thing raises every year.
$47 billion over 10 years. Yeah. In those 10 years, we will spend $46 trillion. Yeah,
fraction of a percent.
We will have a $9.6 trillion in deficits, and that's using the government's very optimistic estimates, likely much more than that. It will do nothing to reduce the deficit whatsoever. But what it will do is it will raise the capital gains tax rate on the wealthy from 15% to 30%. And if you think they will invest as much as they do now at a 30% tax rate as they do at a 15% tax rate, you're crazy. And that means fewer jobs, lower incomes, slower economic growth. It's a bad idea all around.
But it's fair.
But it's fair.
It's fair, Don, don't you think? And that's that's really what he's going after. I mean, there was another interview with one of his guys who said, like, well, yeah, it doesn't fix anything, but it's fair. And we're doing this because it's about fairness. Can you talk to us about the fairness aspect to it? Because under this fairness, guys, what do you think he really wants millionaires to pay?
Well, I mean, where do you even start with this? So part of the background of this, or like what's under the surface, is this idea of, the way they'll often put it is, the people who have gotten the most, or the luckiest people in America, they should, can afford to give the most. But the whole thing is that, by and large, the most wealthy people in America are the most successful. That means the most productive. They're the ones who contribute the most in terms of jobs, in terms of creativity, in terms of innovation, in terms of wealth. And so is it fair that people who contribute the most then are going to be bled the most? Now you ask, what does he think is fair? Ultimately, I don't think he has a number in mind. I think it's simply wherever they are, it should be more. Mm-hmm. However much they're giving, it should be more. Because what's underneath it all is a view of fairness that says that that people who succeed and have wealth should sacrifice it to those who don't, regardless of morality, regardless of what a person earns.
All right. Well, Rick Santelli over at CNBC, he was calm about this. He took a sort of a low-key approach to this whole policy. Let's have a look.
People don't really want to hear solutions. They want to change the dialogue, bait and switch, so we get more worried about what people pay, what's fair. You know what? How are my kids' opportunities affected by how many millionaires there are? I don't see that their opportunities affected. You know what I see is going to affect their opportunity? $15.6 trillion!
That would be the debt figure. I think the 15.6 trillion is the debt. And let's see, the 47 billion that this is going to raise over 10 years, that's $5 billion a year. It's just completely meaningless. Terry, what's amazing to me is that he really is. This is the leader of the free world, in charge of still the largest economy for the
Rick
time.
Santelli?
No, Obama for the time being, the largest economy in the world. expending a huge amount of political effort and capital. I mean, they're going to be voting on this, and it won't pass. They don't have the votes for it, but they want everyone on record in terms of this issue of fairness.
Yeah, they like this fairness thing. They think this is their big ticket to a win in November, and for all we know, it might be. But they'll have a vote. It'll be a Potemkin vote. They know they're going to lose it, and they might try to get it as early as tax day. And you know, this is the way they play the game now. This is the way they play the game. You divide the Americans based on class, and then you completely demonize the opposition, turn them into monsters, and hope to get ultimate power. And ultimate power will come in November, because if Obama's reelected, he'll be able to do whatever he wants, basically.
Yes, because he'll have more flexibility after his last election. Well, the government obviously is seeking more revenue, and it's been really trying to lean back the operations and really scale it back. For instance, it was recently discovered that the Government Services Administration, the GSA, spent a little under $1 million. $1 million, tax dollars, for a 2010 conference at a Las Vegas resort. You can see the very important activities that they were involved in, making music videos and the like. Terry, this thing blew up in a big way that costs a few people their jobs, but my fear is that this is a microscopic example of the amount of waste. You know, it's pretty insulting and all that with their videos, but a microscopic example of the waste that's actually going on.
Well, every year the Government Accountability Office, it used to be called the Government Accounting Office, but they didn't like to be called accountants, so they call it now the Government Accountability Office. They do a number of reports looking at the level of waste in government, and it's enormous. It's extraordinary, and you know, a lot of these people who are being paid twice what their counterparts in the private sector are being paid, literally twice, when you add in benefits, don't put in a full day's work. They do nothing identifiably productive whatsoever. They basically fill you know, paper shuffling spots. And we're paying for it. And then they hold, you know, meetings and conferences in exotic locales, because, of course, they work very hard and they need to.
And then after this conference, there was something else that apparently 5 of them went to Maui for 5 days for a single 1-hour ceremony, some sort of cornerstone, like first dig out of the thing for a building. 5 days in Maui for a 1-hour ceremony. Don, what does this tell us about government and taxes and how they're spent, and then the accountability of those who can make their money off of tax dollars?
Yeah, I mean, it is outrageous, right? But the whole thing that makes this possible is that you have a government that's taking in a sea of money to do things that most people actually support: redistribute wealth in the name of the entitlement state and Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, the giant regulatory state. And in that context, I mean, these are, you know, we're talking about $50 billion that the Buffett rule would raise being, you know, pennies in that kind of situation. So are these kinds of wastes. And so what makes them possible is the fact that government is so large in the first place. If you had a government pared down to its original function, you know, back in the 19th century, if you set aside the Civil War, federal government spending never went above 3% of GDP. Now, do you think that that kind of thing could go on in a government that small? No, the basic issue is we need to get government pared down to its proper role, and then this kind of thing, then you can start targeting this kind of thing.
And when you think about the money, they're talking about $850,000 that they blew in this, and we all go, $850,000, only $1 million that they blew. $1 million, which is 1/1000th of 1 billion, which is 1/1000th of 1 trillion. So they spent 1/millionth of less than 1 year's deficit that we're running at this thing, and everyone was freaked out, and it's like, fire these people. So just think about that when you look at the factors going on here. Anyway, tax day, always exciting. Thank you, gentlemen. For Don and Terry, I'm Allen Barton. You've been watching Front Page.